5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Hey there, spiritual dope. Brandon Hanley, your host, is here with KatKim, and I'm gonna flip it for the new year. Normally I introduce, but KatKim, why don't you go ahead and give the audience a little feel for what you're all about?
Okay. Hello, everyone. I am a former crack addict and drug dealer facing 3 years in state prison, turned a spiritual teacher, leadership coach. I founded a school called the School of Divine Confidence. I am the person that will help you overcome your fears, blocks, and shame so you can step into that best version of yourselves where you can truly make a difference.
I mean, you opened right up with it. I love that. And we'll definitely get into it. So the way I like to start this off with is, hey, universe, power, creative source, all that stuff speaks through us, right? And our message is received to somebody out there in the audience today. It can only come through this medium. What is your message today?
My message today is that each and every one of us has this indescribable, a limitless power that we have access to. And most of us give that power away. Most of us give that power away to the outside world of circumstances and physical things and elections and all the madness, pandemics out there. But I have defined divine confidence to be and having an unshakable faith in knowing who you are and what you're here to do, regardless of what's going on in the world outside of you. And I really, truly believe that we all have access to that divine confidence.
100%. Amen. Amen. I love too, the clear delineation of you have access to it, right? Mm-hmm. Everybody's got access to it. It is fairly innate, right? But it's you just don't know it until you access it, right? Holy shit, this has been here the whole time.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And I love that you've got this divinity school. Like I said, we have a lot in common. I too have a course on divinity, right? It's straight up just called the Divine Framework. But why don't you give me a little bit of what your divinity school, teaches, kind of how you landed on it, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Can I start with where I began?
You may.
Thank you. There's a backstory to this. When I was 6 years old, my mother began feeding me diet pills. And this was kind of the beginning of a lifelong struggle of low self-confidence, horrible body image, no self-worth. I was barely tall enough one day to, put my hands on the kitchen counter. And I remember one day looking up at her, and she was cutting something at the kitchen on the cutting board. And I asked her, "What are you doing?" And she said, "Well, these are diet pills. And these are for adults. And since you're only a child, you only need to eat half of them." So she continued to cut them. And I did not question her. I did not think there was something wrong with it. I just fully accepted in that moment that there was something wrong with me and my body and that I needed something outside of me in order to be okay. So I began to feel absolutely ugly, fat, unwanted, and unworthy all by the time I was in second grade, really. And I also grew up in a very emotionally and physically abusive environment. And I started rebelling at a really young age. I started drinking and smoking at 13, doing hardcore drugs at 16. And by the time I was 18, I was dealing cocaine. And I was transporting it from Washington State to California on the plane. This was pre 9/11. It was really easy to do this. And not that I'm giving you guys ways to do it, but the way I did it was I just snuck the drugs inside of maxi pads. So it would be weird if you did that.
Might be odd if I probably pulled it off, but I mean, listen, with these days and ages, I'd be like, I identify as, and who's gonna try and, you can't fight that.
Yeah. So one day I got caught. I was arrested. I was handcuffed in Oakland, California, of all places. Oakland at that time was notorious for its high rates of homicides and violent crimes. And I was right there in the middle of that. And I was absolutely fearless, but it wasn't the type of fearlessness that comes from courage. The root word of courage is cur, which is the heart. it didn't come from there. It came from a place of having absolutely no regard for my life, my future, my health, my body. I didn't care. I didn't give a damn what happened to me. I was on the fast track of self-destruction. I had no confidence, no self-worth. And so while I was in jail, I was like, I want to network while I'm here. I'm in Oakland. I'm gonna, make some deals while I can. So
May as well. I mean, that's like the central hub, right?
Right.
All the people, you finally made it when you get to Oakland, right? You're like, hey, I'm here. I made it. You guys have been waiting for me. Thanks for holding the spot.
Never thought of it that way, but it's so true. I was like, I'm here in Oakland. I'm gonna make the most of it as I can. So even while I was there, facing 3 years in state prison, I was like, I'm just going to try to make some drug deals while I was there. I pled guilty during that time. I went to part of my whole thing. They made me go to rehab for 2 years. Long story short, I cleaned up the drugs, but this feeling of not being good enough, having no self-worth, no self-value stayed with me. It didn't go anywhere. It was part of who I was. And so I started getting involved in really toxic relationships with men that were emotionally abusive. This entire time, Brandon, I hated the way I looked. I walked around like I was the meanest, nastiest bitch alive. And of course, because I believed that to be true about myself, I attracted everything into my life that validated those beliefs. And it really wasn't until many years after getting out of jail, cleaning up, that I was walking down my apartment hallway one day. At that time, I was very, very depressed, could barely even move. I remember one day I was trying to lift my body off of the couch and I couldn't, because there was this dark energy pushing me down. Somehow that particular day I managed to get up. I was going somewhere, I don't even know where. And I was walking down my apartment hallway to my elevator. And there's this mirror that hung on the wall, top to ceiling to floor, huge mirror. I'm walking down, I look up and I caught a glimpse of somebody standing in the hallway, and I see her in the mirror. And she's just kind of really unkempt, and she's wearing big baggy clothes. Her face is really swollen and puffy. And even while I was wallowing in my own toxicity at that time, I was depressed and, essentially just hating life. I remember just looking at her and thinking, oh my God, at least I'm not that bad. And there was something about her. It wasn't even just how she looked. It was this deep, dark energy that was coming from her that made me feel like, my goodness, at least I haven't gotten that far. And it hit me like a ton of bricks. There was nobody else in that hallway. There was nobody there. It was me. I had become so disconnected with who I wanted to be as a woman, who I was being called to be, and who I was being, that I didn't even recognize myself when I saw myself in the mirror. And finally, that was my wake-up call. And this is, it sounds overly dramatic, but this is literally how it happened. I walked into the elevator, and now, I'm facing that wall with the mirror, so I can see myself in the mirror. And the elevator doors are closing in on me like this. And I said, this is the moment that I'm going to do whatever it takes to become the person that I wanted to be.
No, I love that. Right. Like, even if it sounds dramatic, that's your moment that you chose, right? That was your pinnacle point, right? I think that when you recognize that too, as you're going through it, you're like, no, this is my shit, and this is what I'm going to do, and here's how I'm going to do it. I don't know how it's going to work out. I just know that I'm stepping into it, and fuck it. That's it. Right. Yeah. I'm done. High school dropout, left that part out. And then the other part was when you went in, it's not San Quentin, but I just want to say San Quentin. When you went into San Quentin.
No, it wasn't San Quentin. It was Oakland.
When you went into Oakland, was that from the bus ride after when you turned yourself in, or was that something else?
How'd you know about that story?
Come on, man. I poked around. I did a little due diligence.
Oh man. Yeah, that was that one moment. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So I think that's really key here, because you were at like this kind of desperate moment, but you were also still very humane, right? Like, so for those of you that don't know, she got a bus driver in trouble for sniffing some coke on the side of the road. Cops knock on there. They bust a cop who's a black guy. She's Asian. And like, even in that time, you're like, hey, I'm Asian, he's black. So shit's still like a mess out there. And then you go in and you're like, hey, by the way, those are my drugs. He had nothing to do with it. So you kept him from getting in jail, and you put yourself in a position. And my guess is, like, again, you're kind of like, you're juxtaposed in between being this badass and being like, well, I'm not gonna let that guy go in for me.
Yeah, it was a trip. So this was, I got off the plane one day. I had my drugs in tow. Feathers.
How much were you carting around, just out of curiosity?
Oh, I don't even remember, but I remember at one point I had a kilo, which is, it's a lot.
Yeah,
it's like
that's
a block.
More than a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. I didn't get caught with that kilo though. That would have been
that would have been longer than 3 years.
Yeah, it would have been much longer. But that one day I got off the airplane, got onto the shuttle bus, and I always fuck these words up, like these American idioms. For birds of a feather flock together, right? Mm-hmm. That's it. Okay.
Yeah, sure.
Somehow I ended up being the last person being dropped off. I'm sitting in the front with the driver. We somehow started. Who starts talking about drugs? Well, two druggies when they get together. It
comes up in conversation.
Yeah, somehow it just came up, and I was like, "Oh yeah, I have some cocaine." He was like, "Oh really?" So he pulls over the shuttle bus into the Oakland Hills, and I proceed to pull some cocaine out. He puts it into a piece of paper. He does it really weird. I've never seen anyone smoke or sniff cocaine this way. It was just bizarre. Anyway, whatever, you do you. So he pulls it out, he does it, and then right at that moment there's a flashlight that's beaming in the window, and it was two cops. Because very strange, there's this random bus in the Hollywood Hills just parked there, and he literally got caught red-handed. It was in his hands, and he threw it on the floor. The cops pulled him out, and they arrested him. They told me to sit on outside on this rock, and I'm sitting there and I'm watching this whole thing unfold, and I'm like, oh my God, like I'm gonna get away with this. And then what I did was I better what, so I pulled the rest of the cocaine that I had in my purse, and I threw it behind me behind the rock. And I was like, I'm not going to get caught with this. And as I'm watching this whole thing unfold, all of a sudden I get this voice in my head, and it tells me the truth will set you free. And I'm like, what the fuck? Are you serious? Like whoever you are, you're going to
now's not the time.
Yeah. Right? Exactly. Now's not the time. And I didn't believe in God or spirit. I wasn't spiritual at that time.
Were you high? Were you high too?
I wasn't high.
Okay.
No. Yeah, I was just a girl sitting there getting free and all of a sudden it came, and I just knew in that moment it was God, but I would never admit that. And I didn't even tell this story for years and years and years and years, because I didn't believe in God. And it would be weird for me to say God came and told me this. But at that time, I just knew it. God said the truth will set you free. And I was like, fuck. So I called the two cops over and I told them, hey, you got to let this guy go. Those drugs are mine. They were flabbergasted. They were like, what are you talking about? And I was like, no, they're really mine. And the guy was already handcuffed and booked and put in the car. And they didn't believe me. And so I went back into behind the rock. I was like, look, this stuff is mine. Oh, and then I was like, and there's more in my luggage inside the car. And so they just were like, because there was one of the cops was like, you know what? I would let you go, but now there's another cop with me. We have to take you in. And that's when I had all these, I realized the kind of the inequity of the whole situation. Here I was, Asian girl, and there was a brown man. I'm like, he would have been fucked up and screwed. And I wasn't being a martyr or anything like that, but I just knew that this was my journey. It was for me. All of that came to me in that moment, that this is my journey. This was for me. It was not for him. And that I had to take ownership of this. So they arrested me, and then they read me my Miranda rights, which is a whole nother thing. You hear people, you hear like the cool cop catching the bad guy on TV and the movies, and you hear the Miranda, the rights being read all the time. You have the right to remain silent and whatever. But to hear it being read to you is just bizarre. That was the most bizarre part.
I mean, I don't want to say that I've heard it before, but I've heard it before. It's very surreal, right? It's very just like,
so surreal.
Is that for you guys doing that for me? Thank you so much.
It was so weird. And they proceeded to book me and take me into
San Quentin.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. So that's my story there. And the funny thing out of all of that, Brendan, is like I wasn't scared in the cop car. I just knew that this was a journey made for me, and I wasn't afraid of what was yet to come.
No, I mean, that's cool, right? It's cool in the sense that, you put yourself out there, right? You were probably already still feeling this kind of, fuck it, I'm hard as hell. I'm KatKim, bitch, right? Right. And you're like, and you're rolling in and you're still like, drug dealers are drug dealers, and you're having your conversations, you're still trying to network while you're in there. Just because, I mean, that's just the nature of that space, right? The space that you were in. So what I'm curious about though is like, so you go in for 2 years of rehab. That's a long time for rehab. But what's interesting to me is how you came out of it with a poor self-image, because in my mind, if you go through 2 years of kind of like a rehab program, they should have this kind of building you back up as part of the program. And it doesn't sound like that was there. It sounded like the only thing that they were there to do is to make sure that you don't do drugs again.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, there's so many ways I could talk about this thing that you're bringing up right now. Firstly, do I want to share this part of the story? Okay, so I will. Might as well. Part of the program, you're supposed to go to Narcotics Anonymous, and you're supposed to get signed off and all of that. And I went to my first meeting. I went to 2 of them, and again, I just had this sense of knowing like this is not for me. And I do not advise anyone to do this. I'm not sharing this so that people will follow this, but I just knew it wasn't for me. So I didn't go, and I ended up forging the signatures. So I didn't do that portion of it. And rehab was good for me because I had to not do drugs because I had to do P tests every week. So I cleaned up the drugs, but that feeling of not being good enough, unworthy, unwanted, ugly, that doesn't go away just because you go to rehab, as we all know. If it were that easy, then we wouldn't have these issues with people and their addictions to whether it's drugs or alcohol or shopping, whatever that is. This sense of not being good enough and unworthy, I took that on at a really young age. That was handed down to me from my parents, the generational trauma, that type of thing. And that is what stuck with me all through these years and into my adult life.
Yeah, you mentioned that as part of your culture too, right? Like just kind of the shame in your own culture, right? Korean, was that right? Yeah. So just being, from generation to generation, there's just a different sense of being and kind of what you have to live up to in your heritage versus American slackerism, right? I mean, let's call it what it is, I don't know about slackerism, but so you're still fighting like that kind of image, and then we're working our way up to the divinity school, but I know that there's a couple other pieces in between there. So why don't you go ahead and share kind of what happens after rehab and you're still fighting with your image?
Yeah, so it's that I'm getting involved in really toxic relationships with people. It was so unhealthy. And it was that moment, again, it wasn't until that moment I was walking down my apartment hallway and I saw that version of myself that was not really me, but that I had been living my entire life. And that was that moment where I decided I would do whatever it takes to become the woman that I wanted to be. I wanted to be beautiful. I wanted to be powerful. I wanted to make an impact and transform lives. And I wanted to walk into a room and have people notice me, not forget that I ever existed, because that's usually what would have happened at that time. And so I began studying everything under the sun around transformation. I became obsessed about transformation. So I became a professionally certified image consultant. I began to study like colors and style, like how do you accentuate the most beautiful parts of a person's face and body instead of hiding yourself all the time. And then I became a nationally certified personal trainer to understand what the body goes through to undergo transformation. And this kept on taking me deeper and deeper. And then I became a transformative life coach. I studied 3 years about the mindset and, how our thoughts and our feelings impact our behavior and our results. And interestingly, this quest for transformation on the outside kept taking me deeper and deeper inside into the world of spirituality, metaphysics, and quantum physics, where I discovered that everything that we are seeking on the outside, everything, whether it's more money, better relationships, better health, all of that does not exist unless it exists on the inside in the metaphysical world beyond the physical, within our minds and our hearts. And this is where I discovered that if we want something in the outside world, that thing is not going to happen unless it's within us, unless we're embodying that thing. And that's where I discovered where transformation happens the quickest and the easiest. And then on another level, Brandon, it's like this, because I was so obsessed about like finding the source of all things, I discovered, without knowing it and without wanting this, I discovered that the source of all things is spirit or God.
Oh man, I was gonna try and garble it out there, and I'll have to like beep it out or something. She gave us the answer, but nobody knows.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So yes, and yes. I love it. Right. Like, so I'll let you continue. Then I'll throw some more stuff at you.
Yeah. Well, and this is what I discovered where divine confidence comes from. It's an unshakable faith in knowing who you are and what you're here to do, regardless of what's going on in the world outside of you. That means regardless of how much money you have, regardless who the president is, regardless of a global pandemic, regardless of your past and your history and all the mistakes and things that you've done. Divine confidence is this unshakable faith in knowing who you are and what you're here to do. And this is where I've committed myself to helping other women, other people like me go through that same transformation. And that's where I founded the School of Divine Confidence. But I primarily work with people kind of like myself, nonconformists, misfits, people who've always felt like they've had to fit in.
One sec. So the nonconformist misfits, I was listening to you earlier today, and at first I thought you said nonconformist mystics. I was like, well, that's cool too. Like, it could be nonconformist mystics. I mean,
Yeah.
I would have to say a mystic is a nonconformist by default, but like, why not? Like nonconformist mystics as well. So continue.
Spot on. Absolutely. Yeah. All of the above. Yeah, I work with the people who've always felt like they've had to fit in, but they don't, and they're always trying to conform, but they can't. Those are the people that I love, and I actually call my people misfits and mutants, because one time one of my clients called me Professor X, and he said, "You are like Professor X. You see what the gift in people, but you only work with the mutants." And I'm like, that is so spot on. Yeah,
I get it, and I think that's got to be the deal. Is it's funny, so my kind of my 5 words or whatever kind of value prop or whatever whatever you want to do with it, marketing or just my words, right? It's courage, like understanding, and really those people that don't fit in, it's because like, is it their soul contract? Or it sounds to me like you never really found like your space, right? But that's because like the space that's been set out there is like a space of conformity, and you're just like, it doesn't fit. It sucks to be sitting on the outside, but in the end, I'm super glad I never fucking made it in.
Yeah.
Right. Like, I'm a high school dropout as well. That's something I don't think that I've shared yet on this audience. had my fair share of drugs in hand and sold my fair share. But I mean, look, it's also like you say, who we were yesterday and all those years before. It's just, that's not like my growth trajectory. I'm like, yeah, that shit was fun. I can never tell you that I didn't have I had a great fucking time. I had a blast. I had some moments of tears and shit that sucked. Yeah. But like, I mean, that just comes with any territory that you run up against. But then, you talk about mindset coach, like becoming like doing this mindset coaching. Can we say that going through your divinity course, even though we haven't talked about it yet, just based off of kind of how I run mine, is like divinity is a mindset, right? Once you tap into the divine, you're like, well, like that's spirit, that's source, that's all encompassing, that's infinite.
Yeah.
I think I'm going to be all right.
Yeah.
Right. Like the whole, like, I'm going to give my worries over to God, even though I'm not a Christian. I'm like, I buy into that. Like, I'm like,
yes.
So the subconscious, you talk about it, covers 95% of like all of our stuff, right? Not to mention pumps our blood, grows our hair, does all this stuff. I don't know how that works. Yeah. But I'm doing it. And if I can do this, what else am I capable of? Yeah. Right? Yeah. Exactly. I mean, because I'm like, whatever. So, but everybody has that open to them. So I'm curious, when I hear you talk, and this just could be me, like I hear Think and Grow Rich and I hear Bob Proctor in the background. Mm-hmm. Are you a Think and Grow Rich and Bob Proctor fan at all? Any of those two? I hear you say like Burning Desire and stuff like that. Like,
I've read Think and Grow Rich. I read that a long time ago for sure. Mm-hmm. I know Bob Proctor.
Who are your favorite, like who are your big teachers that made you like really get it? Like when was like the moment, like you talked about being like, here are my drugs, I'm hiding behind the rock, God's all like, hey, I'm in your head, and you're like, not right now, not today, but you're like, and I'm not going to tell anybody that it's God. When were you able to say, comfortably, hey, I've had conversations with God and it's all spirit? And what got you there?
So that's good question. At that time, I didn't even believe, I didn't talk.
Yeah. Then, yeah. So when did you say, all right, okay, fine, I'll let people know, right? We're seeing each other. I'm seeing God.
When did I come out of the God closet?
Right.
Yeah. So I began like really diving into spiritual studies over 10 years ago. I read Think and Grow Rich. I read all the books. I read all the books, Law of Attraction and Esther Hicks and all that. But I started to really, really dive even deeper about 5 years ago. Maybe we'll save this for another podcast episode, but there was another thing, a big, huge shit hit the fan in my life on another level during that time. And I literally was brought to the ground on my knees at a certain time in my life when I knew was absolutely powerless and I had nothing. There was nothing I can do. And the only thing I could do was finally just like you said earlier, you hit the nail on the head. It's like surrender. The only thing I can do right now is to surrender to this thing. I don't know if you're out there, God, but this is, it's so fucked up right now. It's almost funny. Here, just take it. It was almost comical.
You deal with this, right?
Yeah, it was almost like that. It got to that point where there's almost like a freedom to it. I didn't know whether it was going to work or not, but I think that was actually the key. I was like, it can't get any worse than this.
Well, it didn't turn out that way for you, and that's good, right? The deal is though, is like you handed it over without expectations, right? Yeah. You handed it over and you're like, you know what? I absolutely surrender. I'm not doing such a good job with this by myself, right? Yeah. And I like to say, like, I definitely want to talk more about your, school of divinity, but like, once you kind of, we act as humans before we access this source energy in this space, right? We act as human and we deal with all these worldly things, right? And you hear it all the time, again, not like a super huge Bible guy, but like, you can't do it through worldly means. You're like, and then you're like, but I could do it through spiritual means. Yeah. Right. I could do it through like metaphysical means. And then you also talked about like, kind of this level of success. You've got to have a level of belief that you can actually achieve that. And if I look at my history of just Brandon and what I've achieved by myself, right? Maybe not all that I want to achieve I can do by myself. So if I just go ahead and I take in a little bit of God, a little bit of divinity, and then what am I capable of, right? Like what can we, we can go down like, the Wizard of Oz, right? Like arm in arm, like skipping down the yellow brick road, right? Like then we're a trio, and then there's like a team of us doing something versus Brandon, the human, and his worldly ways.
Well, yeah. So check this out. So this is, I remember now clearly what the turning point for me when I went from spiritual mainstream law of attraction to
next level. Yes.
Yeah, next level.
Yes.
Like DOD next level. But one of the things that at that time, one of the handful of things that was happening for me at that time was my niece got arrested for the same crime on another level. Like she updid me. I was like, oh, look at you. Same drugs, more of it, more serious, and almost in the same area as Northern California. And her bail was $1 million. And I just became frantic. I was like, oh my God, I have to get her out of there. I don't know what to do. The bail was at $1 million. It was a very, very difficult time for me. Like I said, though, that was just one of the things. There was a couple other things that was happening. I'll just say it. I discovered my dad had a gambling addiction, and we were $250,000 in debt. So there was like things happening.
Shit show. You called it a shit show. It sounds like
it was a shit show,
right? And then, I mean, I don't mean to like call it out, but again, with your culture too, compounding that. Right?
Yeah, exactly. Hush, hush. Nobody talk about it. Don't anybody. I mean, so much shame wrapped in all of these things. And I got to the point, like I said, where I was like, I can't, there's nothing I can do. I can't stop my father from gambling. There's nothing I can do about my niece. I don't have $1 million fucking dollars, by the way. Right. So I went
Let's not forget about that part.
Yeah, I went to my spiritual center. I started going to a spiritual center at that time, almost as every day, as much as I could, because I needed some sort of sanctuary. And they had a prayer box. And the spiritual leader at that time said, if you need a prayer, don't forget to put a prayer in the prayer box. I thought it was bullshit. I walked by it. I was like, it wouldn't hurt. I have nothing else to do except for wallow in my pity and my anger right now. So I wrote on a little tiny piece of paper, I need $1 million. Or I wrote something like, my niece is her bail is $1 million. I need help. Please pray for me. I don't know what to do. I wrapped it up and put it in the prayer box. Lo and behold, that $1 million bail, it went down to 500,000. And then they wanted me to appear in court. I went to court with my brother, my brother's daughter. And while we were at court, they brought that $500,000 to zero.
That's awesome. Right. Like, I mean, so that's, and so were you at a level where you could look at it that way yet?
I was beginning to see, what was that? If that's not an answered prayer, I don't know what is. And this all happened in a very short amount of time. It wasn't like I put this prayer in the prayer box and then a year later, it was like I put the prayer in there and then 6 weeks later, boom, that $1 million went to zero. And of course, who knows what, I don't know the legalities of all the whatever, but in my mind, it was the burden of $1 million that was lifted from my shoulders. And I was like,
and that's, so I think that's the thing too, right? Like, it doesn't matter what it looks like from the outside. That's been your experience. And you know what? Like, I mean, for somebody to be like, well, that's coincidence. Oh, that's just the way the law works. You'd be like, yeah, but I put a prayer in the prayer box. Maybe you didn't catch that. Right. And so I think that's the other thing that I want to chat with you a little bit about too, right? Because again, so let's see, high school dropout, drugs, bad choices, and then I ended up having my family and had a little epiphany in the middle there as us come along. But before I came into this podcast and this space, literally just in this past year, I was doing something called the prosperity practice, right? Like based off the Esther Hicks game, right? Of have $100 in your pocket and yada yada. Yeah. And I was very, very sell them what they want, give them what they need, right? I was like, because everybody, you talk about this, and I want to talk about it too, the spiritual consumerism, right? Bit like everybody just wants, like, everybody wants all the stuff, but like they don't want the rest of the shit that goes with it. I still, I'd love to hear more on that. But I was like, you know what? I was like, I'm hiding behind this thing. And it's much more than just like this law of attraction. And even when I was doing it, mine was more along the lines of like Neville Goddard and like some of these other people, right? Like,
Yeah.
and then I just let it go. I was like, you know what? I was like, this shit's all spiritual to me. It's all like, that's what it is. And I'm going to lead with spirituality and see where it goes. And ever since I did it, like, it's just blown up. I mean, nobody reached out to me when I was doing prosperity practice. You've reached out to me. People reach out to me like left and right to be on spiritual dope. And it's just like, so it's just like, it's fucking crazy, right? Because now, like, when you're like in alignment with spirit and your purpose and yourself, then shit just starts to happen. And you're like, well, what?
Yeah.
Where's this coming from? Right. That was the other piece I wanted to ask you too, was like, when you talk about your divinity school, right, and getting into, is there a piece in there where you've got the self-confidence and all that? Is there a piece in there where you delve into purpose as well?
Oh, 100%. It's all purpose. It's all purpose. And that's part of the framework where I help people. I just want to give my students the skills to know how to reach their own divine confidence at any given moment and any given time. And I think that's the false belief that our purpose is a one-time thing, and that it's something that our purpose is going to be this thing that we do for the rest of our life. And that's actually not the case. That's the opposite of spirituality. Spirituality is being in the moment, in the here and the now, and being present to the gifts and whatever is with you in this moment. As we know, there's no. If you're regretting the past and you're future tripping, then you've missed the point of this present moment. So, part of one of the things that I teach is that your purpose is not in the future. It's right here. It's right now. And if you know how to ground into that and become present to that, what else do you need? Right. And just like you shared, like once you align with that, then everything unfolds naturally and easily. And that's what I think most people have a hard time grasping. It's that surrendering and letting go of having their hands in all the details and having to know how everything's going to happen.
Well, that's because how it looks on the outside. Right.
Exactly.
So what you see on the outside, you see other people doing on the outside. That's, I can use some examples like when I still work in sales, when I see historically, like people like acting frantically, it's always going to be frantic for that person, right? Like that person's always on fire. This person's always this way. It's always going to happen for that person because you talked about it earlier, like, your level of belief is, I have to do it this way. This is the way I've had success before. If I don't meddle the whole time, then the shit's not going to happen for me. Right. But like, it doesn't have to be you.
Yeah.
And as a matter of fact, it's not you. It's maybe it's initiated through you, but like you work with a team, most likely of other people.
Yeah.
You don't have to, be on them. But again, you're tapped, if you're tapped into your purpose and you're aligned with that and you're rolling with Jesus or whatever, you're doing whatever you're doing, right? And you're tapped in the source, and you can kind of step back for a second and let it like gently unfold, and it will.
Yeah.
But try telling somebody that.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, that's part of, that's part of kind of this toxic masculinity energy that we've all been kind of fed into. And what I mean by that, there's the masculine and there's the feminine, and they're both equally beautiful and powerful, right? But when the masculine energy is about is very linear, it's taking action, it's finding something and moving towards it regardless. The feminine energy is about allowing, it's about letting, it's about being. Right? The masculine energy is about volition. So you see something, you go for it. So in this world right now, it's become toxic, meaning we've taken everything and we've turned it into something that we have to set a goal and we have to make it happen regardless of who gets harmed in the way.
Well, otherwise you're not a success, KatKim. You're not a success if you didn't set a goal and achieve it, right?
Exactly. So now we've all been conditioned to believe that that's the only way and the one way that we achieve success, that we have to set that goal. We have to go for it. We have to power through it. Just do it. I mean, we see it all over in marketing, but we see this now in our government. We see this in extractive capitalism. We see this, and what I mean by extractive capitalism, going for like reaching, revenue goals, regardless of who gets harmed in the way, regardless of the natural resources that we demolish along the way. So it's not a person, it's not a political party. It's just the collective energy that we've all been part of and we've all molded into. And spirituality has also been kind of swept into that as well. And that's where I came to see that even spirituality can be toxic when it's just about, what do I want to manifest? How much money and the big house and all of that? And how am I going to think positive and bypass all the issues that come along with this type of lifestyle? I'm not going to talk about that, but I just want to create the life that I want. And I'm going to use spirituality to do it. And now I'm spiritual.
And that's true, right? But I mean, and again, like it's funny, my wife and I were talking earlier, like there's a different level too, where it sounds like you've achieved, right? Like you've gone through that phase, right? Mm-hmm. Like it sounds like you went through that phase with like, Esther Hicks and Law of Attraction, right? And, but you came out on like the other end of it, right? Mm-hmm. Where sure, it's okay to want, but the idea to, want, you want without attachment to the outcome, right? Like, yeah, I'd love this to happen, right? This would be great. I'm going to go work towards it. But I'm totally cool if it doesn't turn out the way I envisioned it, right? It could, and then maybe accepting that outcome, right? Like the outcome that comes, that came out pretty cool, right? Yeah. Or just being like, all right, we're gonna try a different way, right? But not getting caught up in that.
Yeah, well, that's what I was gonna say. But the problem is most people are attached.
That's 100%. Yeah. But that's the same thing as even creating a goal is a challenge, because people are like, they're afraid to share what they even want, even writing it on paper to themselves, because they've always been taught, hey, you've got enough. You should be happy. You're, even some of your words, right? You should be lucky you got what you got, right? Like, and that kind of thing. So now it's like, but I want a little bit more, but everybody says I can't.
Yeah. Well, it's totally mixed messages. Right. There's that part where you should be happy with what you have. And then there's the overarching message that we receive from all the marketing out there and the consumer culture that actually you need to do more and more and more and more and more and more. Right, so that we get mixed messages. And I think the key here, Brandon, is that, again, divine confidence means taking your focus away from that outside world. This is the practice of spirituality, taking your focus away from the outside world, going inwards and really digging in very deep into and finding out what actually do you want in your heart of heart? What is your heart's desire? Right. And that's where the connection to your real source and to your true calling actually is right there. And that's the thing that's hard for people to do, is to disconnect from social media, seeing all these Instagram posts of people who have all the money and all the cool pictures, and really going in to find out what actually are you being called into? What is your true good in this moment?
So how'd you find yours?
By that process. It's a constant process. It's like,
were you listening, Brandon?
Yeah. Hello.
Oops.
But something important about that, let me answer this, is like, I have to find it again and again and again, because I am part of that culture as well. Right. I have, I'm on social media. I see all the things. I'm not free from that. I want all the monies. Okay. I want all the things.
All the things. Right.
I want all of it. Sure. I want all of it. And I see people who have more than me, and I'm like, fucking A, why don't I have that? And then it's that reminder, well, let's go back in, and that's that process of reclaiming my personal power and my divinity. And that process is about letting go of that attachment to the outside world.
So what is your process then, to attach to divinity, right? Like, how do you help somebody uncover that for themselves?
Yeah, it's like, the questions that I ask there's first I ask you, like, first you have to get really clear on what's not working in your life. What are your biggest challenges? Where do you suffer the most? What's the thing that you keep coming up against? Most people are trying to run away from that, but I want to say, no, that's actually here to show you, if this is not the thing you want, what is the thing you want? What is that thing? So that's how I guide people. If this is what you don't want, let's use that to point us in the direction of what you actually want. But once you figure out what you want, it's not the tangible thing of it, it's the essence of it. So for example, if you want a big home and you want to be able to come home and take care of your family and you want your own space, okay, that's great. That's the physical representation of it. But what is the essence of that thing?
What makes that for you? Like, why is that? What does that represent to that person? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, what is the essence of the physical, tangible thing that we want? When we can get to the essence of it, so for example, if we're getting to the essence of that big house, maybe it's connection with your family. Maybe it's family that is the thing that you're actually craving. That's that inward journey. We're so focused on the thing and not the essence of it. When we can get at the essence of it, that's the calling. That's God. That's the way God is showing up for you in the essence of it.
No, 100%.
Outside of the tangible.
Yeah, even on the outside, even during, look, I'm not that deep into my journey, right? Like I think I'm like 3 years in, but I took the accelerated course. The meditation, has been something big for me. And usually when I do like a meditation, I'm a big fan. I love Headspace. And he's always like, go to like make that light edges of, how far can you expand it? I'm like, edge of the universe, bro, let's go. Right. Like, right outside and riding that edge. Right. Because that's where the edge of creation is. Right. Like this in my mind anyways. But then even just today, our inside is just as infinite as the outside. Right. Like, random epiphanies. Our inside. But that's what it was. Like, I spent a little bit of time digging around on the inside and meditating and reflecting on the inside. But if you think about it, it's just as infinite as all the rest of the universe. And so, spend some time there. Yeah.
And if you think about it, it's like all of God or spirit, whatever name you have for it, all of God is in you just as much as it is in the universe. All of God is in the tip of this pen that I'm showing you right now, as it is in you. God doesn't get split around and allocate 10% here and 20% here.
Right. It's like the sunshine, right? Like the sun's out there. He's not like everybody can go step out and get as much sun as you can today. Right. Like, I mean, there's no allocation to it outside of like, shade, whatever. But I mean, essentially like everybody gets the same amount of sun. It's like infinite. There's more than we can use and that kind of thing. Just the same as like you're saying, hey, God's like, there's more than you can use. Feel free to suck it up.
More than enough. More than enough. Yeah.
So that's fun, right? Where do you want to go? What's next?
I think the interesting part of all this is, I was on this spiritual journey, manifesting things, teaching people how to manifest. And then it was like, I went through this kind of dark night of the soul again. God, I do that a lot, damn it. I need to cut those down.
Here's the thing. I don't know that I've had any,
Really?
So like, I'm almost jealous, but I'm not, right? I'm like, everybody's like dark night of the soul, but I'm like, I'm not, I'm going to pass. I'm cool.
No, they suck.
But tell me.
Yeah, you should just pass. I'd rather pass on them too. But this is now, I started going to my spiritual center. I did the prayer in the prayer box, got obsessed with this thing called God and prayer.
What kind of spiritual center was it, by the way?
It's Science of Mind, the Centers for Spiritual Living.
Okay.
It's a philosophy of thought that really combines, it goes into the golden thread of all spiritual traditions and essentially boils it down to that we are all one and we all come from one source. And it wasn't recognized. It wasn't trying to be a religion, but it became a religion, is now officially recognized as a religion as of maybe 5 years ago or so. Okay. And I started just really going deeply. It's study of mysticism essentially. And I became licensed as a spiritual practitioner Took me three years to do that. And I learned about our connection to source and, the power of prayer. And I read all these cool books. It was like law of attraction on crack.
Yeah.
That's
It's
what it
like, I
was.
mean, it's a, it's more than a force multiplier, right? Like
Yeah.
I love, I love that you bring up drugs, right? Because here's the deal too. Like, how would you define the difference between, being cracked out or high versus having a spiritual high?
Well, I don't know. One's going to fuck you up physically. The reason I'm trying to go back to my days of smoking crack and all that. I'm like, the only thing that you're kind of giving me like, what do you call it when you have like a craving?
Craving.
I'm having a moment where I'm like, oh, that would be really nice if I could smoke that right now.
Listen, I'm right there. I mean, crack wasn't my thing, but like, definitely, like, I'm always like, I did the party scene right back in the day, like the raves and dancing and all that stuff, and I'm always like, man, I wouldn't mind a couple pills and some acid, and let's just go dance.
Acid, ecstasy, cocaine, all of it. So
sure.
You're making me feel like, oh, that would be so nice.
Somebody scream.
Yeah.
But
really distracted me with the question.
The question was, when you think about it, right, and your connection to spirituality versus that same ethereal high that you get when on drugs, right? So you get that kind of high when you're on drugs. But then there's the kind of high when you get when you're a spirit, aka spiritual dope, right? Like that's where spiritual dope comes from. Like, get your hit of spiritual dope, because like you can have this. So how would you define the difference between the two?
Oh, really good question. So here are the similarities that I'm putting together that I have never really thought of it because no one's asked me that question. And this is really important for people to know who are on a spiritual journey. So when you do drugs, as you know, you get high and then you have that crash. You crash afterwards, and it really, really sucks depending on the drug that you do and how much. You're out for days. The same thing is with spiritual highs as well. And I think that's the thing. A lot of people who are on a spiritual journey, they're seeking the eternal high. Like once they get there to some sort of nirvana, that they're going to stay there. And then when they dip, when they crash, that they're doing spirituality wrong. And I want to tell you, actually, it's all part of that journey. And that's the dip, the crashing, the part where you don't feel good about yourself, the part where you are confused and there's darkness. I would want people to know, and this is what I teach in the School of Divine Confidence too, is that there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with being there. It's all part of the journey. And trying to go for that peak and that high and dismissing everything else as not being spiritual and doing it wrong, that's where you get fucked up, because now you're trying to constantly seek for that high. You're a fucking drug addict, damn it.
It's true. I mean, it's just what it is. And then the deal is, though, is this like, yeah, but I could think of worse habits.
I know. Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
But that's a great call out, right? I mean, I probably hadn't thought about it in that fashion before, the coming down from spirituality, and then feeling like I'm doing it wrong, right? Yeah. Or getting caught up in it. I'd have to think about it, right? But I mean, so you would liken it to at least kind of the coming down parts of it, right? Where you have your highs, and then would you liken it to also, like, if you have a large spiritual high or an ongoing spiritual high, then there's going to be a substantial recovery period?
I think there's always going to be highs and lows to everything. That's the eternal spiritual truth. And in my Buddhism practice, I practice Vipassana meditation. And all of that Vipassana meditation is centered around this one law, which is the law of impermanence, meaning that all things arise and all things fall. And if you look out in nature, the seasons arise and fall. Plants and trees arise and fall. Humans, our life We live, we grow strong, and then we decline, and then we die. Everything, our emotions arise and fall. Our cravings arise and they fall. Where suffering happens is when we get attached to one thing arising and staying there, or one thing going away, falling and staying there. That's where suffering happens, is that we want something to stay the same or change. But the truth of all things in all of life and all of nature is that they arise and then they fall. So when we can accept that, then we can accept even, okay, let's continue to use the analogy of drugs. For example, that craving, yeah, might as well. That sense of like that craving for a drug, or any food, or having sex, or anything that drives pleasure. The truth is that sensation is going to arise, and if we allow it, it will fall. It will go away. And if we're really practicing spirituality, if we become aware, then we can just simply observe that craving come up, and we can watch it go away. Right. But most people can't, right? They want to react. They're reacting to that craving.
Well, I think that too. That takes practice, right? Catching yourself, right? Making the conscious choice, right? Awareness of all things, not just of like your spirituality. Awareness of, oh, that's a craving. Oh, that's a whatever. So I think that's huge. I like it. What's hot in your world right now? Like what are you working on that you think people should come check out? Is it your school? Is there anything else going on?
Yeah, I got this school going on right now. It's called the School of Divine Confidence. But what I've just recently launched, this will be my second episode, is Unsermon.
Unsermon.
Yeah, Unsermon.
I like it.
Yeah, it's a weekly unsermon where I share a life story, a spiritual lesson, a rant, a sermon on whatever topic to keep us affirmed and galvanized on our spiritual journey. But it's really about deconditioning, decolonizing, undoing, right? Unconditioning, unsermoning.
I like it. I love it. What brought that about for you?
Going back to what you and I have started off with, is I just found this passion for talking about spirit and God, but I'm not religious.
So is your God, like, tell us about your God. I'm curious.
Oh my God swears all the time. My God is like very passionate. My God is a thing. It's an experience. And it's something that I can call upon at any time. It's not this thing that I have to pray for or pray to. It's just this, it's an energy, it's a vibration. I call it God vibration. And the more that I access that, just the easier that all things become. And the more I study it, the mysticism, metaphysics, the more I study the source of all things, it's just mind-blowing to know and to really understand that, oh my God, I am that source of all things.
Shut up.
So that's what this exploration of unsermon is a different idea and relationship of God and what we can and what's possible with that.
No, it's great. It's great. I love that you're taking it out, right? You're bringing it to the people, and you're doing it in your own way based off your experiences. So that's great. Thank you so much. So where am I going to send people to go kind of hang out with you?
So I do these. Yeah, I do the weekly unsermon. I do them live every week in my Facebook group. It's called the Confident Leadership Community. So come on, join me in there. I've got free training going on. I've got things to offer you. Come say hi. I'd love to see you.
Sweet. Who's your ideal client?
My ideal client is the person who just knows in their bones that they are being called to do something important, but they feel stuck. They're uncertain. They feel like the thing that they want to do is impossible. It's the nonconformist, the misfit. It's the mutant out there in the world.
Nice. So somebody who knows they've got power, but hasn't figured out how to control it and is afraid to share it.
Yep. Yeah. And to come out and be who they really are. Someone who's always been trying to fit in and they realize, oh my God, this isn't working for me.
Sweet. Well, hey, thank you so much for coming on today, KatKim. Really appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, Brandon.